what Reformation generally is often the use of the same words, but they then transform and become something else. So, for example, I'm a big fan of original sin. So if you take original sin, but you read it in a Lacanian way of going originary lack, you're right. One is you're being true to the term, right? You're being absolutely true to the term, but suddenly it becomes invested with a whole pile of new meaning. And then you can say that the church has never been into original sin. There's a guy, Matthew Fox, and he talks about original blessing. And you go like, even Calvinists and Lutherans really believe in original blessing because you start with oceanic oneness, then you go into a fall, and then you go into redemption, right? Which is kind of, in a sense, in psychoanalytic terms, you've got a pre-traumatic subject, you fall into trauma, even if the fall is necessary. And then, which I think sometimes a wee bit in object relation sometimes is like, yeah, so even, and the fall is maybe necessary, but still a fall. And then, so, but if you take the idea of original sin as originary lack, you say, no, the fall comes first, right? There's an originary lack. And then there is the fantasy of an original blessing, and there is a hope for a return to that blessing. That's a very Shizekian thing, which is the fall comes first. So there's an example where you actually use a very traditional, and all the progressives hate the terms original. They're getting rid of all these terms because they think they're done. We're like, no, this is brilliant. Let's steal them back. Original sin's brilliant. An originary lack that marks us all as a primary repression, right? And then there is, then we can term sin. What's sin? Well, it's very easy to say that sin is any attempt to cover over the lack. And then go, okay, that's interesting. And then you take a theological term like forgiveness of sin, right? Sin is connected to debt a lot. So the idea of having no money is to have nothing. To have a debt is a nothing, it is something. You owe money, you get letters, you have to pay it back, it causes stress. To pay a debt is to put the money into the lack, right? To forgive a debt, like the year of Jubilee, is to say the nothing is nothing. It doesn't fill the lack. It takes the sting out of the lack. So then suddenly again, you're taking a theological term, a language that already exists, the forgiveness of sin, but somehow it becomes invested with such profound new meaning. That's the work that I've been giving myself to for the last 3 decades so it's a kind of a new language, but more radically, it's almost a repopulation of existing language, but using this incredible resources. And also one final thing is, it's not that I'm bringing, Freudian or Lacanian or Marxist, whatever ideas into this language. In many ways, those traditions came out of the religious tradition. So I'm just taking back the treasures that were mined. Like for me, the death of God started with the Apostle Paul. He was the one at a cultic level, like at a local religious level. He said, there's something salvatory about the death of God. Luther then rose it to the dignity of theology. And one of the reasons why Luther did that is he said, Luther was like, all our notions of God are going to be projections like Feuerbach, right? But he says, so what's the one thing that we would never think? Well, we'd never think that God is dead and God dies. That's not like, so he kind of used that as a starting point because he said that's so counterintuitive. God never dies. God either doesn't exist and can't die, or God does exist and can never die. The idea of God existing and God dying is an oxymoron. So and then Hegel raises the death of God to the dignity of philosophy. Then I would say Nietzsche raises it to an existential event. So Nietzsche is connected to Paul because Nietzsche and Paul both preach the death of God as a salvatory event. I'd say Freud develops the technology of the death of God, and Lacan kind of continues in that tradition. That's my genealogy of the death of God. So and the language of theology then has, I think, real value. Sorry, anyway.